What is up? Hopefully you guys are having a wonderful day. Back here with some more Alan Wake 2 DLC, the Lake House, the final DLC to the main game itself. This is going to be my video whether I recommend it or not. So basically I'll give you an introduction what the DLC is, and I'll tell you what my pros are, what my cons are, so what I like, what I didn't like, and then whether I recommend it or not. So without further ado, let's get right into this. In this DLC, you play as FBC agent Kieran Estevez, and basically you've been summoned to the Lake House, an FBC-owned facility, to basically figure out why it has gone dark and basically investigate what is going on here. Now, in terms of the timeline, this DLC takes place before Alan Wake 2. Obviously, Kieran was a character that we encountered in the main campaign, but it ultimately leads to why she was searching for Alan Wake in the first place, and by the end of this DLC, it makes a lot more sense and ties a lot of things together. But without further ado, let's basically get right into this DLC. As basically all of this takes place in this whole facility that has multiple layers and multiple floors. And let's basically get to the first part of my thing, is the pros and what I liked. For the pros and the things I liked in this game, just like in the main campaign and Night Springs DLC, this game has an amazing atmosphere, and this DLC is no different. It doesn't take much for things to change on a dime. It's definitely a very creepy and unsettling thing, whether if you have flashing images, things that pop up, the walls change, the environment change. One of the cool parts of this is basically when you go into this whole facility, you have this whole concept of you keep trying to get down to the bottom floor, but you need to find ways to get to the elevator. You take an elevator to go down, but what you'll quickly realize is once you get out of the elevator will magically just disappear from behind you, and you basically got to figure out, as reality around you is changing ever so much, whether you might need to figure out the password to a computer, or you might need to figure out how to get batteries in certain areas, or you just might need to figure out how to navigate out of an endless loop. There's a lot of things that will keep you on your toes down here, so be careful. There's a lot of references and Easter eggs to all the other games within the Remedy universe, and this DLC is no exception. You'll see a lot of familiar names, concepts, faces, even a whole scene dedicated to what seemingly is to be Control and its sequel. You even have a new enemy type, which is the paintings, which are definitely very creepy because a lot of times if you're too close to one of these paintings on the walls, they might just grab you even before you even see them, so you got to be careful. Another thing you got to watch it for is they are immune to your gun damage. It's only until you get a certain weapon that you're even able to hurt them. So in the meantime, every time you see them, it's in your best interest to just run and avoid them at all costs. There's a lot of files in this game, and maybe a little bit too many if you catch my drift later on in this video, but there's also a lot of things you can read up on lore, references, stuff like that. And that's stuff that I definitely like to read and learn about because it never seems like I learned enough because I always feel like there's more questions than answers. But I do take that in a good way, but there's a lot of things you can catch references from earlier games or events that have yet to happen. Another cool thing is some of these things are even read by the man himself, which I always think is a nice touch because I could just listen to Alan Wake himself narrate a lot of things, or Mr. Door. Unfortunately, he doesn't make a return to this DLC, but either one definitely is a blessing for me and the ears. Combat is roughly the same as it was in the main game. Basically, use your flashlight to kind of blind and stun the enemies momentarily so you can do more damage to them. And rinse and repeat. As I said, the new weapon is more used to be against the paintings, but you can use them on the other ones too, but you don't have a lot of ammunition, so I'd save it more on the bigger enemies personally. But overall, combat really doesn't give too much of a positive or negative for me. It's just much of the same. I also like the fact that even though you're in such a messed up environment, people dying left and right, they still have to interject their own Remedy style of just comedy or a little bit of, corniness and stuff. I just like this guy sitting in here basically writing the script thinking he's just in a normal place, completely oblivious, it seemed like, of what's going on and how you just kind of gotta play along with it. But once again, it has that funny Remedy touch to it. It's a serious thing, but it doesn't take itself too serious. And I think that's a great way to strike a really good balance between that. And I think that's what always kind of made the Remedy style games feel a little bit unique to me, especially the Alan Wake ones.
Campy, 70s sci-fi kind of way. But you could dial down the role-playing like 15, 20%. Just some professional advice.
And my last positive, I did like the character of Kieran Estevez. I did like her personality in terms of how she was trying to make the most of a bad situation, even have some humor interjected on top of her trying to get over things that were truly getting to her mentally. But it just proves that I like a lot of these characters and would love to see them return in the future. But now we get to the negatives. And I think the biggest negative in this one, for anyone who has played this DLC, is very easy to figure out. And it's just real simple. It's way too short. I mean, I was trying to do everything in this DLC, and most of my problem was I kept missing things. Because a lot of things are easy to miss and stuff in terms of what light switch you need to turn on to progress through the level. But honestly, I think I clocked in about like 2.5 hours. It is very, in my opinion, criminally short, and it shouldn't be this short. I forgave the Night Springs DLC just because I knew they were little like what if scenarios. They're just supposed to be fun. I thought this one was supposed to be a lot more bigger and more impactful. But the problem is, in only 2.5 hours, it really doesn't take long to get through it. And as I said earlier, kind of the double-edged sword. While I like reading files and learning information, I think there's just way too many files for an only 2.5 to 3 hour DLC. And to me, maybe it shouldn't have so many files. It had more something to actually do, make it more substantial. I feel like this DLC should have had at least, I don't know, maybe 2, maybe 3 more hours. I think it should have had a few more levels, but it's just over way too quick. And because of that, I just feel like I can't definitely see a lot of people just looking at it as like it's not worth what you're paying for. And I think that's my biggest problem. I don't think it's bad what you're doing. It's just not long enough to be worth what you're paying for. Considering the fact that, honestly, other than the new enemy and a new weapon, there's really not anything different other than having a little bit more narrative background in terms of events that would happen in the main game. So that wraps up my pros and cons. But do I recommend it? And it's a hard one for me to decide, but honestly, if I had to say so, I have to kind of go with more, no, I don't recommend it. But it's not because it's not good and entertaining. It's just way too short. I mean, I think a lot of people thought this DLC would be a lot longer since it's the last one. It was probably the more important one. But I just feel like this DLC passes you by way too quick. And I just feel like that's the biggest problem inhibiting this. On top of in the 2.5 hours, a lot of it is you reading a lot of documents. I just feel like having so many documents, which wouldn't be a problem if the DLC was longer, but I feel like you're reading more things than actually, I guess, playing the game, which is a problem when you have a really criminally short DLC, and that's the biggest problem with it. I enjoyed what I did, but I just wish it was so much more longer. So ultimately, for what you have to pay for, I just don't think it's worth it in the value. I do believe you should give it a try, but I'd definitely wait on maybe a sale or something like that for this DLC personally. It's not something I'm going to be jumping out of my seat with how criminally short it is. But so no, it doesn't get my recommendation. But overall, this is the conclusion of all the Alan Wake 2 DLC and the conclusion of a game that I did deeply love, and I did like the Night Springs DLC, and I did like this DLC, but obviously I just wish it was longer. But at the end of the day, that is my opinion. I want to hear your guys' opinion. If you have played this DLC, what do you think about it? Did you like it? Is there things you like, things you didn't like? Do you agree with me that you feel like it should have been so much longer for basically being the final DLC and what they are charging you for it? Let me know down in the comment section down below. But thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video, and hopefully I can see you guys back in the next one. Thanks, and I'll see you all later. Peace.